This Family Life News podcast is made possible by the support of listeners like you.
Are we getting dumber? That's the topic today on Real Answers. It's a regular Wednesday feature here during the Family Life News Report. We talk about the issues that matter to families with licensed mental health counselor Christopher Anderson. Welcome back, Chris.
Good to be here, Mark.
Always good to have you. Well, we have a certain age. We know the exasperation of, say, walking into a room and having no clue what it is we came in there for. But this is something deeper, more wide-ranging and concerning. There's new data out that seems to indicate that regardless of age, human cognitive abilities seem to be trending downward. That's kind of scary.
It's not entirely surprising if you really look at the amount of time that we spend, and this goes back to what we've been talking about here the past couple issues of Real Answers here.
Right.
The amount of time that has been spent online since really the internet really got cranking, and especially now with all these apps, it really has a proportionate increase to our decline. So it's not too hard to figure out what's going on here.
No, for sure. I coached some youth baseball back in the day. Even back then, and this was kind of around the beginning of smartphones really starting to show up. But I noticed that just in kids, just couldn't focus. I mean, baseball is a game where you just kind of got to stand there and pay attention, and they couldn't. They just can't. Some of that's just little kid stuff, but it was a trend too. Even before smartphones, watching TV, whatever, instant everything. They need instant everything and couldn't focus. And we're starting to see that all over the spectrum of society.
And if you look at what has happened to our education system as a whole in the United States, I mean, back in the day, we'll say even only 2 generations ago, we were near the top, if not at the top, in terms of quality of education in the world. And now we're hovering right around 35 in the world. So there's a lot of questions that need to be asked about that. And I think there's a lot of answers that are pretty easly to discover. But like you were saying, you're coaching little kids, and especially nowadays, these kids are growing up with screens. They're growing up with instant this, instant that, instant. Everything is instant.
Yeah.
To the point where children are no longer expected out of necessity to have to learn to be patient and have to be able to focus for any length of time because everything is so instant.
It's just so pervasive. They see it in adults now. I guess that generation has grown up and they stay that way.
Well, adults, too, the numbers of adults that are claiming to have, we'll call it adult attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, those numbers are way up. And of course, we've known for a long time that children and teens that are also having this diagnosis given to them are way up. I don't necessarily think it's all a true diagnosable situation. Now, when I say that, as a mental health therapist, when I get a case of ADHD that is the real deal, boys, it stands right out. But when I get a lot of people coming in, a lot more than I would say the true cases, they're just simply spending way too much time on their computers, on their smartphones, using all these apps and playing all these games. Quite honestly, if you think about it, just because a computer or a smartphone can actually do something doesn't necessarily mean that you should be doing that. Okay?
Right.
Yes, these things have a seemingly unlimited potential to quote unquote make our lives easier, but are they really? Or are they just serving to whittle away at our mental acuity and our intelligence? And as a matter of fact, there's studies that are out now that are showing, that our attention span is dwindling down. Years ago, around the year 2000, it was about 13 seconds, and now it's like 3 to 5 seconds. If you really take a look at the amount of time that we can do this, it's having a major impact. But these aren't necessarily irreversible. Okay, it can be reversed.
That's the good news there. Yeah, our phones got smarter and we didn't. You're listening to Real Answers. Mark Webster, along with licensed mental health counselor Christopher Anderson, talking about the dumbing down of humanity, it seems. So let's turn to scripture here. It certainly has a lot to say about patience and also about parenting and reining in some of these things.
Yeah, it really does. And a lot of studies are saying, well, COVID, the lockdowns of COVID and this and that. Well, here's what I would want people to think about. When the Great Depression occurred back in the 1930s, and you want to talk about, I realize everybody's 401ks right now aren't looking fantastic, but if you want to think about it, this is not a Great Depression. We're still far better than what we were back then. In life, when you had to pack up your family and leave and go to an entirely different area of the country, not even knowing where you were going or what you were going to find when you got there, simply for survival, was far more disruptive. Now, and that's the generation, and the one after that, they were the ones that were quote unquote the greatest generation. Isn't Isn't that interesting? So they had that level of disruption. They didn't have the internet. They didn't have instant access. They couldn't just pick up a telephone in a lot of cases and call. I mean, they could in some cases, but you had to have some money to do it. But boy, they ended up being the greatest generation. Now, we need to go back and say, well, what were some of the things that they were doing that we aren't doing today? And take a look at some of this and understand that, yeah, we had COVID. Your kids were locked down for a while. Sure, they're a little bit behind, but you know what? They can get caught up. We as parents can say, hey, I'm going to spend a little extra time with my kids practicing this or practicing that, but we got to prioritize that. We got to turn those screens off. And in terms of sharpening our own mental acuity, here's some tips. Start doing some extra reading. The number of folks that actually read an entire book or a novel in any given year has dropped so much. If you're going to exercise your body, you got to exercise your mind. Same thing, same principles apply. Turn the screens off, get better sleep, drink more water, eat better, and then practice by reading books. Start reading something that's light but of interest to you. If you can, avoid the screens, use printed material instead, and keep practicing that. And you might have to actually cut some things out permanently. I'm not saying turn off your phone forever. I'm not saying that, so don't panic. But what I am saying is be careful about allowing the phone and all the really cool things that your phone can do to dictate what you actually do. You need to be in control of it, not the technology itself.
Excellent advice, Chris. You've been listening to Real Answers. I'm Mark Webster, along with mental health counselor Christopher Anderson. Chris, thank you again.
Great being here.
Thank you for listening to this Family Life News podcast. If you've been encouraged by what you've heard, please share it with others and click the subscribe button to automatically receive future episodes. Family Life is a listener-supported ministry. Podcasts like this are made possible by your financial partnership. Find out more at familylife.org.